Hi there, it's Nelson here, and today in this video, I'm going to actually go through the Houdini 20.5 Keynote highlights. So if you haven't had the time to spend maybe about 2 hours going through the keynote, this might be the video for you. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of snippets of the keynote itself, and then I'll also be talking about, highlights and my thoughts on the keynote. So let's get to it. So first up, well, yes, he is right. Christian Bargiel is right. This is like 8 months since the release of Houdini 20, and they already have 20.5, which, as you will see in later on in the highlights, there's lots of things to be covered that they've released, that they've worked on, and it's like he mentioned, it's like an Olympic marathon. So many features. Even though 20, they already introduced like the Apex rigging systems and animation systems, so that's a big one. With this 20.5 is yet another major release in my opinion. And so, there is a lot going here. If you're a Houdini user, you know that progress moves very fast in this area. And so there are a lot of exciting things and a lot of things to learn as well and maybe keep up on, but all that for another time. So let's go back.
I did mention there machine learning. So let me tell you a little bit about where we are there, because everybody is curious about our plans for machine learning as a company. We're taking it very seriously. We're continuing in a very cool-headed kind of way. We watch the hype. We don't take part in the hype. We like new tools. We like new toys, but we're not building toys. We're building real tools here. And we understand that in this community of ours, having that undiminished control over your results, the art directability of the work you do is quintessential. And ML is not quite there yet to give us that. So at least for now, ML will grow foundationally in Houdini. It will coexist, however, with proceduralism. It will not replace it. And we will build it in layers.
So there you have it, SideFX's plans on machine learning, and it's good to know that SideFX, there's a lot of hype on machine learning, and honestly, it's a little bit tiring to talk about it. There's, I think, AI fatigue, if there's such a term. But what I like about SideFX in general is that they tend to sort of cut through some of the marketing hype and focus on things that are really going to be helpful for CG artists. So I like that they take a measured approach towards machine learning, but obviously there are many areas in which machine learning can be useful, and they are already showing things in that area going forward, whether it's making use of machine learning to create deformers, and training them based on simulation data that they already have. Those are things that they have already shown or started to show in Houdini 20, and slowly things are going to be built upon that. So good news there, and also good news, if you're worried about machine learning taking over your jobs, it's not quite there yet, and I don't think it will really entirely ever be quite there. But it's definitely going to be able to speed up some of our workflows, and so being able to do some machine learning inside of Houdini, whether it's training models or making use of ML models, is going to be an interesting part about Houdini moving forward. So let's quickly jump into their dynamics announcements. The main big thing in their dynamics announcements is going to be the new MPM or material point method solver for effects like snow, but it's also able to simulate other sort of particle-like effects that stay together, like concrete and all that kind of stuff. So let's check it out.
The most well-known sort of example of an MPM solver usually deals with snow. So we've got Craig here bursting out of this snowbank just to show what we can do with that. It's a really nice example here. And as Kristen said, the MPM solver is something whose goal is to sort of recreate physical structures. So different types of materials. Snow is one of them, but there are many other ones. So let's take a look at a quick setup here. So if you're familiar with our Sops-based flip solver, we've sort of emulated a similar setup for the MPM solver. So you set up your sources, your collisions, and so on, in their own sort of nodes that then all plug into the solver itself. So in this case, we have this rock collider, and we have our flip here as the input. And we're going to basically use one of our preset material models to turn them into particles and simulate this as kind of let's say a granular sort of approach here. So we're going to walk through a quick setup and then go ahead and hit play. And this video is sped up slightly, but you can see that we are caching this live. So this is more or less the performance that you're getting at in this MPM solver. Then we'll quickly change our material preset to this Jello preset, and now we get this totally different result. So again, the goal here is to create like a bunch of different types of materials and then simulate them in as realistic way as possible. But again, as was mentioned, it is sort of a multi-physics solver. So these things interact with each other. It's not just a either or. So, in this example, we have sort of mud, rocks, fluids, all in a single simulation. So there's no caching of one thing and then re-simulating. It all happens in the same space, which of course gives you this really nice interaction where the mud and the water and the rocks all play off each other to give you this really sort of believable interaction between all these things.
So for those of you who are not familiar with the MPM solver, this is a solver that, it first was being used in graphics, I think, about 10 years ago on Frozen, where Disney research did a bunch of research work into using the MPM solver for Frozen. And I remember I was sitting there in a meeting with Disney effects folks because we were going to use the MPM solver. I think we did end up using it for a couple of shots on the Project Warcraft that I was on. But MPM is traditionally slow, and so based on what we are seeing here, it looks like they've really sped it up quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the exciting stuff that we could do with it and how fast it really is. That being said, a lot of you are thinking, MPM, so what's the point of MPM compared to Vellum and etc., etc. The whole idea of MPM is that then you don't have to predefine fracture points. You don't have to predefine sort of clumping areas of clumping, because if you have sort of the properties of density, mass, velocity, as well as some of these other physical material point properties, you're able to simulate the way concrete should realistically crack or fracture, the way sand or wet sand should realistically crack or fracture, the way snow, when it's compressed, ought to clump together and all that kind of stuff as it reacts under pressure. So that's the whole idea, that you don't have to do any sort of real pre-fracturing in there. And we'll see a couple of examples in the keynote. And yes, I should mention that it's a multi-physics solver, which means it can simulate technically water, sand, snow, or like solid objects like concrete or jello, semi-solid kind of objects, metal bending, all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that because it's a multi-physics solver and that it can simulate water, that you necessarily want it to simulate water. So there are pros and cons there when we delve into the details of using solvers for different types of things. So hold your horses there if you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to learn MPM and do everything with MPM. All right. Okay, so over here we see the MPM solver being used in this example for just the sand and water kind of mixed. Again, this water is done with MPM, but it doesn't really look that great. So this is another example where it's a multi-physics solver, but you may not necessarily want to use it as a water solver. You can also, specify its rigidity so that it's really stiff, and then you can, get this sort of the entire buildings being sucked up and all. So that's an example of custom forces, all delivered in a SOP-based sort of network. I'm sure you can do it in a dot-based as well, but the SOP-based just makes it simpler if you need to do something real quick. Over here, side effects is demonstrating this entire building being sort of set as a concrete example and saying how they don't have to pre-fracture everything and everything just kind of falls. But if you really look at it, it's not really that great. The exterior of the building kind of looks like fondant. It's been caked in fondant, and also it doesn't necessarily mean that this will be the only solver that you'll use for large scale destruction like this, but it's definitely got its advantages, and it's good that it becomes another part of the arsenal as an effects artist. Another example here is the sort of mysterious watermelon-like fruit. Really nice what it's able to do to that skin as it fractures and all. Very realistic, but strange things it's doing on the interior. I'm not sure what it is. So again, take it with a, you kind of have to learn what are the strengths of the different solvers and when to use them, or when to use a combination of them. But the entire idea is the fracturing is going to be sort of, you don't have to predefine it. Again, this is metal bending, so that's also cool as a result. So until you get your hands onto it and how much art directability you're going to need from it, compared to, say, using the Vellum solver versus speed as well, it's going to be, you're going to have to try to understand both solvers and use the right thing for the right speed and art directability of those solvers. Nonetheless, pretty excited that some of this stuff is coming, because it will simplify some of the workflows, and probably you would use it in a combination. And over here, this is what I think is probably the sweetest demo of MPM, is this simulation of an avalanche using MPM. And again, this is great when it comes to MPM. Snow is its strength, where it can really do really good looking realistic snow. So no surprises here that the avalanche is SideFX's best demo for the MPM solver. All right, so the next big thing that SideFX showed us in the keynote was some of their character animation and rigging tools. And so let's get to it.
Fully built with pre-shipped auto rig components. And when we look at that example, we see on the side all our auto rig components, each of them representing one specific thing that we add to our rig. So yellow is always IK, blue is always FK. We see it on the controls and then everything. And we are just layering this on top to get to our rig, all in Sops. What we can also see is that skeleton. We call it a guide skeleton. It's not just any skeleton. We put some initial stuff on it, and what we're putting on it is tags. You all know tags from so many applications. We use it everywhere to have a bunch of words assigned to a given thing, and then later we filter like crazy after it and be incredibly flexible. And that flexibility is something that we're now transferring to our rigs to make them truly procedural.
So with Houdini 20, SideFX already introduced the Apex rigging sort of framework that truly allows sort of procedural rigging. And they've also introduced sort of this auto rigging components, which is, you can always predefine a leg or a hand or a tail or a spine, and then you can combine them in different ways. And now they're just sort of introducing the next evolution of it, which is making use of tags to be able to tag the different parts and how they should sort of join up together and make sense and meaning as to how those different joints ought to come together. So technically that makes it truly procedural now. So it's an interesting thing. I'm curious to see where else they would use tags for, but other than that, it's just sort of an evolution.
Does look a lot like Python. It feels like Python, but it isn't Python. Python always just operates on your rig, but it never is your rig. That is simply not possible. Apex Script can be exactly that, because Apex Script is nothing but a code interface, a Python code interface for our Apex graphs. So what you see here and down there, this is exactly the same thing. Good thing about it is you can just create like a small snippet, add something, you're done with it when you're familiar with code. If you're not familiar with code, you can still read those notes. They're all there. You can read them. And as I said, that function up there is part of your rig. So now that we know more about that, we of course want to come back to our spider and see what else we can do with it.
So I think the bigger announcement there is Apex Script, really. So it's probably been there. It's just something that they weren't ready to announce just yet, because at some point in time it gets tiring trying to rig everything using nodes, and it's just easier to use syntax. The choice of using Python as a syntax for Apex script is probably good because most TDs and riggers are going to know Python. And if you don't know Python and you're in a TD or in rigging, you probably want to learn some Python really quickly. So I think that's really, what drives the use of Python as the language for Apex script. And it's going to be convenient to be able to add these snippets in there. So, yeah.
So let's look here at the toucan. That's a little bit sad for an animator, as you see. So let's dress up our toucan. We're creating an add groom node. And you can simply add your groom in there and you get directly a smooth deformation of your groom for the animator. And that will help you tremendously with the silhouette. If you think about a creature like a bird where the feathers very much define what the character actually is. And we don't just want to have a preview of that behavior, we actually also want to control and animate it. So we select a few of those feathers on the add groom node, and they instantly get turned into guide controls. And you can see that very smooth interpolation in between them and also along them, giving you wonderful curvature that will help you to style now those wings individually. And the same concept can be directly applied to any other groom. So here we have Cappy with a mohawk, and if you really want to style it and animate it now as an animator, you have a much better idea of what's going on with that hair, and you might as well just leave it at that, or you still post-process it. So you have the option of choice there, but as an animator, you have a much better understanding.
So the last big thing about the character announcements, in my opinion, is the ability to sort of visualize your groom inside of animation. It's really fast. It's actually shockingly fast. And you can also have those curve guides. And all of this is really nice because in production, we've had to jump through several hoops in the past, trying to do quick renders, visualizing it, because it's so hard for animators to get a sense of the silhouette of your characters if they are full of fur or full of feathers. It's something it's pretty tough. So this is really nice, especially for any sort of production or studios that are going to do lots of animals with heavy fur and feathers. This is essential. And they also made other announcements, combining sort of the TED volume simulation to try to preserve the volume of that fur in as convenient a way as is possible. So all those improvements just to make sure that you're able to really visualize and work with feathery or characters in a way that preserves their silhouette in the viewport.
Up in the right corner, we have our new animation layers pane. And we can create that pane, create a new layer, either by creating an empty layer and adding controls to it, or since I have my selection sets already set up, what I can do is I can just select on them and create a layer from selected controls. And by default, layers are created as an additive layer, but we can also go into the settings and we can switch that to be an override layer if we want.
So there you go. Other stuff that they have included is going to be catching up on like animation layers, things that would make an animator's life possible inside of Houdini these days. And we also see later on they've been doing some motion path work as well. They're just trying to make it easier for you to be able to switch constraints for different objects and all, just all being done. So just making animation a lot easier for animators inside of Houdini. All right, next up, let's talk about Solaris Karma highlights, and really only the things that sort of interest me or I think would be interesting. All right. So the Solaris Karma features are just going to be a lot of sort of ongoing quality of life improvements features, performance features, as they try to deliver more and more production capability and stability inside of Solaris and Karma, right? So first up is in this example here, you can see is basically an improvement of Karma XPU between Houdini 20 and 20.5. There is a significant increase in rendering speed as well. It resolves noise pretty fast, so that's pretty awesome. Then we have an improved stage manager node that allows you to position things around, as well as, change variants and all, so that you avoid context switching. So I don't know how many people actually use the stage manager node. I don't really use it as much, but I can see how this can be convenient if you don't have to context switch as much. All right, and over here we have a quick surface material node. So you just prevents you from having to jump in to create a material library and then a material network, all of that. If all you want to do is just assign some quick textures to an asset, you can just do this and you don't have to jump in and out. So this quality of life convenience features that also, you can see it goes into the this component geometry sort of setup that they have over here. Personally, one of my favorites now is the ability to jump inside of a SOP node inside LOPs, and then it will gray out all of the SOP context. Instead of like not showing you anything at all, it would show you all of the USD LOP level stage elements, but it will gray them out, or you can focus on the SOP object. So it gives you more context. So personally, I like this a lot. Here, more enhancements on the clone tool. I haven't actually used this at all, but now you can also render AOVs and just a bunch of feature additions to make this clone tool sort of more usable and more quality of life features. And then here we have the sort of crowd instancing. I think the ability now to be sort of smarter with the crowd procedural, which will basically detect where crowd agents are doing similar things and then instance them instead of create unique crowd agents. And so that kind of speeds up the performance and takes less memory. So these are all just sort of performance enhancements. Personally, what I think would affect more artists is the ability to now actually have USD instance lights and also have sort of per instance overrides. So you can actually see like, oh, okay, you can vary the color of all of your different light instances, which is nice and actually really important to have. So good stuff there. Lens shaders are also getting, a little bit of quality of life enhancements. You can now drop a Karma lens material node and then just adjust all of your lens associated settings there. So it's a lot more convenient. You don't have to create so many nodes now. It's just, one little node there. And so that's pretty cool. Good to have. So the announcement of an improved physical sky. Already H20 came with the physical sky, but now with this atmospheric physical sky, it also simulates like the haze in the atmosphere, which is pretty nice. So I don't really use this much, but I can tell that, it may be worth exploring, and it looks pretty good as far as the demos are concerned. So next, Scott talked about some modeling enhancements. So let's, kind of quickly take a look at some of these modeling enhancements. A lot of them are sort of with this planar inflate. It's just a deformer that helps you really to sort of inflate planes, if you will. I think really good for pillows and also sort of bubbly type of stuff that people have been doing with vellum for a while now. Now you can just use it with a deformer. And there's some improvements to the quad remesh tool, but really what's the thing that's more exciting for me is the introduction of the sculpt node, which allows you to sculpt now. So that's really nice because, we could use it for a bunch of different other workflows, like inside of sculpting environments, sort of proxy geometry, which then we can feed into your other simulation and deformer nodes in environments to get more details. But I think this is just the beginning of a set of nodes, a suite of nodes that SideFX is planning on creating for sculpting features. So it's not quite ZBrush or Blender yet. And then the wrinkle deformer is also kind of cool, which is basically, I don't think it's simulation based at all. So it's able to give you sort of instantaneous wrinkles. So these are all kind of nice, cool additions that you can use in effects as well. So next up, we have sort of the performance enhanced clip tool, where now it's able to clip high poly geometry much faster. And then it's able to have a lot of quality of life improvements, like filling the polys along the clipping plane, capping it, that kind of stuff. So it's nice to have, because I use the clip tool or the clip node pretty regularly. All right, so with environments, a side effects is made Project Dryad, which we've known a bit now for a while, alpha from Side Effects Labs. And if you don't know about Project Dryad, well, it's simply using sort of AI and machine learning to kind of figure out and simulate what makes the most sense for natural, realistic biomes, how, based on the position of the sun, where trees are, and how trees shade other things that affects how they grow. And also it's really trying to make it as realistic as possible in terms of the way these biomes are shaped. So I think the ideal is to try to reduce the amount of having artists need to do manual sort of tweaking and shading, hopefully to get like 80% of the way, and then we can focus on the remaining 20% that drives the quality. So that is now alpha, and you can try it whenever Houdini 20.5 comes out. So here we come to the big announcement. Really, I think the biggest announcement of the 20.5 keynote is Project Copernicus, or basically COPS 3.0. For those of us Houdini users for a long time know that the Houdini COPS context hasn't been getting a lot of love over the last couple of years. But with Copernicus, this is a complete rewrite. It's super fast, and the goal is, real time. It looks really, really fast and promising, and being able to translate data from 3D, whether it's geometry, poly, volume data, to 2D and back and forth. Those are really, really promising. Completely OpenCL accelerated, written from scratch. So it's really fast in my opinion. And obviously the goal is eventually to have a solid compositing suite inside of Houdini. But in its first iterations, a lot of the features it is introducing is texture generation and synthesis. So it overlaps on a lot of stuff that Substance Designer and Substance Painter does. So hopefully, you don't have to round trip as much through different softwares, but really exciting stuff. So I'm going to show you a little clip about just a quick introduction of how it works, and then we can talk more.
So right away, you're going to dive into Sops and inside the Nuke Copernicus network. And you'll see right away that we get this 3D version of a 2D image. It's sitting in 3D space. And that's really important to the overall philosophy of Copernicus, which is that we're always living in 2D and 3D sort of together. And to start out, we're just building some basic noises here. So different fractal noises, whirly noise, and we're just doing some basic remapping. With the goal here, we want to create a basic texture map that maybe represents some sort of stone or concrete with some paint on it or something like that. So we're just going to do some remapping. We're going to remap that black and white image into color, just add some sort of dirt and grunge into those cracks. Then we're going to add sort of a paint color on the outside, this sort of bluish color. Add a little more noise to this, just to add a little surface detail so it feels like maybe it's a bumpy surface or something along those lines. And you can see we're getting really fast performance as we're changing these, which is really important. Again, that goes back to the whole OpenCL engine that's running all this stuff. So we've created sort of a color map here. Let's go ahead and maybe create something like a specular map or a roughness map. So we'll invert it so it's rougher in the crevices than on the surface. And then we'll use a height to normal node to generate a normal map from that essentially height information. And the key to this whole process is not to work sort of abstractly the way we have so far, but instead to use this preview material where I can just quickly hook up my standard sort of PBR texture inputs, and then see the result directly in the viewport as I'm working. So as I visualize this node, you can see we have the normal map. It's responding to the lighting. This is all in the new Vulkan viewport. So let's go ahead and adjust this a little bit again. We're just going to tweak the roughness a bit, just to show how this updates live in the viewport as you're working. So, okay, let's look at some fundamental tools here. That was a little preview, but let's start with SDF Shape. So here we start out with this interesting representation. It's sort of a mathematical representation of all these different shapes. What's interesting about that is that you can work with them before, in some sense, they become pixels, which is what happens with this node where we basically are rasterizing it now into pixels. And that gives us a lot of control, not only over the shape, but the interpretation of that shape. So we have the distance to the edges, for instance. So I can easily remap those edges and create interesting sort of patterns. So let's just, again, plug it into our preview material here so you can see how it looks. And now we're starting to create sort of interesting combinations of effects. And again, working in this sort of part before we've, in some sense, turned them into pixels means we get really clean things like Booleans out of these things. So we can combine these shapes together while still retaining all that rich SDF information that's there. So as I combine these shapes together, I don't sort of mangle the results. I can wait until they're pixels and then operate on them further from there. And that means, we can keep layering this. So subtract them together, do an intersection, and start getting really complex patterns and results out of the other side when we're ready to turn it into a more full-featured pattern. And here I'm just scaling things down to give you sort of a look at how these things all combine together.
All right, so there you go. Very intuitive, very fast way of, again, creating procedural textures using noise or patterns using SDF shapes. Again, these is some of the stuff that, Substance Designer and Substance Painter, features and functionalities that they have for a while now, and those are starting to overlap with Copernicus. So you can see more of these SDF shapes and some of the more complex patterns that they've been able to generate, and all this pretty much real time. And really, I can't emphasize the speed is really quite interesting. But also a lot of these stuff, because it's basically pretty much like a texture generation or sort of procedural texturing, procedural rendering inside of, say, Unreal Engine or something like that. So you can make use of RAMs, UV, scrolling UVs, and all that kind of stuff to create some really cool effects, distortion, RAMs and all. So, all of that showing the capabilities and the power of Copernicus to do some of these texture generation stuff. So, I mean, if you've been using Substance Designer, Substance Painter, I don't think this is quite a replacement to it, but I'd love to hear what you think about Copernicus's features now in the comments below. So all of these things dealing with UVs and all is pretty cool. And they also have some sort of tile pattern where you can do tiles, and eventually, I think one of the examples, which is really cool, is sort of this ability to bring these tile patterns in from sort of the context of 2D, putting them onto your 3D geometry. And for example, over here, being able to put some of these spline curves that are in 3D back into 2D, and then generating like fabric stitches and all based on 3D data, so or points on 3D data. So this is going to make a lot of those fabric stitching type effects going to be texture generation going to be much faster and more efficient, open up new workflows of possibilities, which I find is really fascinating and interesting for me. And then they showed a bunch of other things, which is basically using curves and then generating interesting textures using 3D curves that sort of drive the way textures are going to look. So interesting, and it can be animated as well. So you can create animated textures, or simply be dependent on how those curves get generated. A bunch of other stuff. This is kind of like copy the points, if you will, but this is I think they call it the point stamp node. So instead of copy geometry to points. You're like copying sort of images, 2D images to points on a grid. And so you're able to generate these sort of texture of leaves, swirly type with if it's driven by noise that drives orientation or direction in the sort of UV space. So interesting flow maps, you can do all of that kind of stuff. And then being able to translate that back onto an actual 3D geometry. So it's able to get like depth data from Sops and then put that into make use of that inside of your texture generation, and a whole lot more sort of these SOP level 3D data that you're able to get because they've implemented a new Vulkan engine that is super fast at getting all of this 3D spatial data from the SOP context and then translating it into the COPS or Copernicus 2D texturing context, so things can be done really fast. And then because of that, it opens up so many other workflows, as you can see, whether it's creating, doing simulations and then using those simulations to then create sort of textures of rocks, for example, say. So really cool information that you can get, even ID maps and all. So I think, it's good. And everything is tileable as well. So you can create tileable textures, which is great. And not just simple tileable, you can also use hex tiles. So interesting. Here are a couple more examples that SideFX showed of how they were using Copernicus and UVs to sort of drive these procedural textures that respond to the different UVs of the objects. So whether it's creating these sort of bolts, if you will, on the edges of the seams area. Those are all kind of cool. And I thought this was particularly cool, which is this showing of sort of rust eating through paint and then those paint layers kind of bubbling and dissipating. I think that was pretty cool in my opinion. Now here are just more examples of Copernicus being used to generate different types of textures, from patterns on ornamental plates and bowls to really a whole lot of realistic materials and a whole bunch of other sort of textures that you can generate with Copernicus, which I think is interesting and just shows the capabilities that Copernicus is able to do even at this beta stage. So interesting. I'm looking forward to actually testing and using it. Yeah. Because I think for the longest time, a procedural texturing tool inside of Houdini is just been sort of necessary. All right, and then over here, this is a quick one where they talk about Copernicus being used. Again, it is a compositing context, so you have all of the nodes that you need to make slab comps, and so this is them showing how they're able to generate slab comps inside of Copernicus. And all they did was they were able to create a slab comp network, and from there, pretty much use the standard sort of merge or blend nodes, bring in the AOVs, and do a bunch of stuff there, undistort the image or distort the image, and put all of that back in there. But really what is interesting about this particular workflow is the ability to take that slab comp and as they show it, actually put that into a slab comp import. So what you can do is with that slab comp, you can now have inside of USD, have it take that slab comp and process the renders. As it is rendering, it will produce that slab comp result as well. We'll take those renders, run it through the slab comp, and immediately show you those slab comp results in real time. So this is really cool because the quicker you can get the final pixel, the better always. And so I've not seen a package that is able to do that. And personally, I think this is really important because you can add glows if I'm making sparks and fire and ember, and I want to quickly see glows in my final results and how those glows are going to affect my choice of rendering, then it's always nice to have that. So and then just because it can not only do slap comps, we see pretty much later that they take the whole of this slap comp workflow, and it can be used as a post-processing filter, right? So after the renders come out, you just apply the comp network to it, and it can do other stuff like chromatic aberration, distortion, hue shifts, any sort of these things together. And obviously it works with any sort of open effects plugins. So all of the Sapphire plugins are going to work off the bat, and so that is really, really nice, because there is a lot of Sapphire plugins that can be really, really useful. And so you can see all these post-processing sort of effects coming in through Copernicus, and I believe that you can also do some of these sort of stuff like solarizing things. So you can make sort of stylized filters, if you will, on Copernicus. And then just sort of really the beginning of it is Copernicus supports ONNX or Onyx. And Onyx is just a open source format where different AI ML models will train how to do certain things, and so you can export that to a Onyx file format. And if Copernicus is able to read that Onyx file format, so it's able to do it's able to take any sort of AI ML model and apply its results to any sort of input you give in. And so in this case, this is using an example from the Onyx style transfer, where it's able to take this image, take the Onyx style transfer model, and then create a result that looks kind of like this. So it's just the beginning of machine learning inside of Copernicus, machine learning being applied to 2D textures. Very cool sort of results. And again, more stylized results that they are showing with sort of wavy lines, if you will. And yeah, so interesting things that can be used there. So if you're interested in sort of stylized hatching effects or toon shading, all of that, motion graphics, I can see, purpose there. All of this are possibilities with the Copernicus. And then here they just kind of take physical pyro explosions and then try to make sort of a stylized effect out of it. So you can see those differences. Some look good, some don't really look that good in my opinion, but these are just the possibilities. This, in my opinion, is kind of cool, that these are all just kind of running from Copernicus, and it's able to stylize renders pretty quickly like this. So this is cool, and that is sort of the Copernicus network that drives this. And then sort of stylized fire, which I think also kind of looks really nice. Possibilities to really quickly do sort of look dev on stylized effects without requiring to do it through the shader, but actually do it through compositing, like using these post-processing filters. This is also sort of a more stylized take at a physical simulation that they showed off in the past. But you can see all of these are sort of different possibilities of stylization now if you can apply post-process filters. So Copernicus was the big update inside of Houdini 20.5 together with the material point method solver, MPM, and as well as some of the other Apex stuff. Those are, I think, really the three big ones. Everything is sort of quality of life and performance enhancements, if you ask me. But what are your thoughts about the new Houdini 20.5 features? What do you think? What are you most excited about? Personally, I'm most excited about Copernicus, as well as trying it out and doing some of cool stuff with it. And if you want us to cover sort of more of this Houdini 20.5 topics as Houdini 20.5 comes out in July, please let me know in the comments below what kind of topics do you want us to cover, and we'll be happy to come up with more videos on those topics. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and if you are interested in more of this stuff, do check out our YouTube videos, which I think YouTube here is going to recommend you some stuff that YouTube thinks that you would enjoy from our channel. So check it out, and don't forget to give us a subscribe and thumbs up and a like. That helps the channel a lot, and I'll see you all next time. Take care.